Weeks before, people whispered that a very wealthy man was going around visiting neighboring villages close to Amana. But the part that really made everyone's ears stand up was when they heard he came with many gifts: money, bags of rice, bolts of colorful clothes, even shiny jewelry. So when word finally spread that he was coming to Amana, the entire village was excited. From that moment, every mother in Amana suddenly remembered how beautiful her daughter was. They began to polish their girls like precious calabashes. Some mothers even borrowed fine clothes, just so their daughters could be attractive. On the morning the man was expected, the whole village had a different air. The dusty roads were swept clean, and children were warned not to play too roughly. Women wore their best wrappers, and young girls stood near the roadside, pretending to fetch water or sell fruit, but really waiting to be noticed. The harmattan wind carried dust across Amana village that morning. Children abandoned their games of suwe and ten-ten, running barefoot through the narrow paths between mud brick compounds to catch glimpses of the approaching entourage. Mama Ayo was pounding yam in her wooden mortar when her youngest son burst through the entrance of their compound, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mama, Mama, a big man is coming!" The sound of wooden gongs echoed from the village square, calling everyone to witness something remarkable. A magnificent procession approached through the main road. At its head rode a man of imposing stature, on a stallion black as midnight. His flowing agbada was embroidered with gold thread that caught the sun, and heavy chains of precious metal adorned his neck. Behind him, a long line of servants led pack animals loaded with wooden chests, ceramic vessels, and bundles. As they moved through the village, the servants distributed gifts with generous hands: silver coins, bottles of perfume that filled the air with exotic scents, and wrappers of cloth so beautiful that women gasped at their colors. Even Ezewankwo, the village chief, who rarely emerged from his palace except during the festival of New Yam, stood at the entrance with his 4 wives and numerous children. The strangers dismounted with fluid grace and approached to the chief. His voice carried across the gathered crowd, rich and commanding. "I am Aka, son of this very story." The name stirred something in the memories of the oldest villagers. Aka, the son of the former chief, who had abandoned his family decades ago, the young man who had turned his back on his dying father's pleas. But looking at his powerful, wealthy figure, such memories seemed impossible to reconcile. Aka was the only child of Chief Moka. Young Aka had vanished during the dry season 30 years ago, leaving behind a heartbroken father and a mother. Now he had returned decades later, when his father was long buried and his mother, Mama Aka, was too old to remember him. But it was clear he had not returned to see them. For 5 days, Aka hosted the most elaborate festivities Amana had ever witnessed. The village had never known such abundance. On the 6th morning, as the village still celebrated his generosity, Aka made an announcement. "I have decided to take wives from among you, but the women are all so beautiful that I can't make a choice. So, I will pay the bride price of every woman in this village." The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Surely this wealthy man was joking, or perhaps making a poetic statement about his admiration for their women. But Aka's next words made his intentions terrifyingly clear. "I will pay the bride price for every female in Amana from the age of 12 to 40 years. This includes those already married to other men. Any husband who cannot match the bride price I offer will surrender his wife to me." The horror of this declaration slowly sank into the crowd. The bride price he offered for each woman was more than most families earned in 5 years of hard labor. For families struggling after the previous year's poor harvest, the temptation was overwhelming. "Any family where the wife is below 50 and has daughters of marriageable age, I will marry both mother and children. This is my generous offer to the people of Amana." Aka continued, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. The only women Aka exempted were the wives of Ezenwankwo, but even the powerful chief could not protect his daughters. All 10 princesses became Aka's wives too. Married men were deprived of their wives, and younger men remained single as every eligible woman in the village had become property of one man. The natural order of life had been twisted into something unrecognizable. Mazi Okonkwo, a respected elder with 8 daughters ranging from 12 to 26 years old, could not bear to watch his children's futures destroyed by this madness. Mazi Okonkwo's daughters were the most well-cultured ladies in Amana. Many rich men in Amana and the neighboring villages have come for their hands in marriage, but Mazi Okonkwo rejected them all. It was even said that they were more educated than the princesses. He always said his daughters were for powerful kings and royalty, and he was making them ready. In the dead of night, Mazi Okonkwo loaded his 8 daughters onto a wagon, pulled by his strongest ox. They fled toward a distant city where Aka's influence could not reach them. But Aka had long ears, and within few days, he heard about it. Aka's punishment was calculated to serve as a warning to anyone who might consider defying him. He commanded that Mazi Okonkwo and his wife, who were both 50 years old, would serve him as slaves until they had worked up every kobo of bride price he had paid for all their daughters. Within a week, both Mazi Okonkwo and his wife died from exhaustion from the hard labor. Their bodies were carelessly thrown into the bush like refuse. Some family friends gathered the remains and gave them a proper burial. Aka's custom was disturbing and unpredictable. Wherever he was in the village, he would randomly select any woman or group of women and force them into empty huts, abandoned storage buildings, or even clearings in the forest. There, he would satisfy his desires without regard for their comfort or consent, then ride away on his horse, his choral laughter echoing across the village as he departed. The women he left behind had to find their own way home, often injured and always traumatized. But speaking about their experiences was forbidden. Any wife caught complaining about their husband's treatment would be severely punished. Soon, nearly every woman in Amana village was pregnant. At first, the elders saw this as a blessing despite the circumstances. They joked weakly that Aka's seed was strong and that Amana would soon have many children to replace the joy that had been stolen from their community. The shocking thing was that they all lost their babies, and in many cases, the mother died with the child. Mama Nkiru, the village's most experienced midwife, who had safely delivered hundreds of babies, attended to 23 of Aka's wives during their labor. Not one child survived past 2 days, and 7 mothers died during or shortly after delivery. After the 23rd death, Mama Nkiru refused to attend to any more births involving Aka's wives. She claimed that something unnatural was killing the babies from within their mothers' wombs, something beyond her ability to heal or understand. The people of Amana knew they were in serious trouble, but nobody knew what to do. Terror had paralyzed their ability to think or plan. As months passed, Aka's presence became even more oppressive. He expanded his mansion into a sprawling complex with multiple courtyards, adding rooms and buildings to accommodate his growing collection of wives. The village that had once celebrated life with festivals, wrestling competitions, storytelling sessions, and communal celebrations became a place of silence and fear. The talking drums that had connected Amana to neighboring communities fell silent. Then, on a night when the moon hung full and blood red in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the silent village, the villagers woke to an unusual silence that felt different from the oppressive quiet they had grown accustomed to. There were no guards calling out from Aka's mansion, no horses stamping restlessly in their stables, no servants moving about their duties. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the very air was waiting for something momentous to happen. As dawn broke with unusual slowness, a few brave souls ventured toward Aka's compound. What they discovered defied all logic and reason. The gates stood wide open, swaying gently in the morning breeze. The courtyards were completely empty. The buildings that had housed hundreds of people showed no signs of recent habitation. Aka, his servants, his guards, his horses, his treasure chests, his weapons, everything had vanished without leaving the slightest trace. Messengers were sent to neighboring communities. No one had seen Aka or his entourage. It was as if Aka had simply dissolved into the night air like smoke, after wrecking countless families and destroying the village of Amana. Some villagers celebrated cautiously, hardly daring to believe that their ordeal might finally be over. Others worried that Aka's disappearance was merely another phase in his supernatural manipulation of their lives, perhaps a test to see how they would behave in his absence. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of his return, hope began to stir in the heart of Amana's people for the first time in many months. The oppressive weights that had crushed their spirits began to lift slightly. Unfortunately, many more women were pregnant with his children. The celebration of Aka's disappearance proved premature. Within 2 months, it became clear that dozens of his wives were carrying children conceived shortly before his mysterious departure. Given the tragic pattern of all previous pregnancies, the women and their families prepared themselves for more heartbreak and death. But this time, it was different. Instead of ending in the familiar tragedy of stillbirth and maternal death, these pregnancies progressed normally. The women remained healthy throughout their terms. But as the weeks passed and more babies were born, a disturbing pattern began to emerge that chilled the hearts of every observant villager. Every single child looked exactly the same, not merely similar as siblings might resemble each other, but completely identical in every feature. Soon, the village of Amana was filled with dozens of these identical children. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to communicate with each other through means the adults could not understand. Decades after Aka's disappearance, people who visited Amana village always made the same observation. All the villagers looked remarkably alike, as if they were members of one enormous extended family. But the villagers learned to deflect such comments with carefully rehearsed explanations. "It's because of the great love we share as a community," they would say with forced smiles. "We are so close as a people that even our children reflect the bonds between our families." Only the elders who remember the true story could recognize the lie hidden within these words.